Awesome. Thanks for the lovely intro there, Zach. Like you said, my name's Kevin. I head up product marketing here at Orkes. I'm located in actually sunny New York City. And I'm super pumped about today. I think we've got a ton of really good stuff on the docket for you guys. We get this question a lot, right? So what is the difference really between Conductor OSS and Orkes Conductor? And really the basis of this presentation is hopefully to give you guys a couple of key points and insights to help make that decision for yourself, whether you're evaluating Conductor OSS or you're maybe thinking about switching over to Orkes Conductor. So I'll go through a bit of the agenda here, currently in the introduction right now, so no need to focus on that too much. We'll talk a little bit about the core functionality of Conductor OSS and Orkes Conductor to start, kind of those key elements that really bridge the two. They're kind of two in one, so to speak, but we'll talk really about what are those about four core functions of both these workflow engines. We'll get into a little bit about the key differences, so maybe where Conductor OSS is maybe lacking on certain features and where Orkes Conductor really shines, given certain features or enterprise features that it does have, where those kind of fit in terms of what you're looking for from business goals or achievements that you might have. And then we'll get into Orkes Cloud. This presentation is a very high level, I would say, value proposition driven presentation. And so when we talk about Orkes Cloud, I want to talk about that is, it's a very big difference, right? When we talk about self-hosting Conductor OSS versus a managed service that delivers Orkes Conductor via Orkes Cloud. So very important topic to cover there. We'll go a little bit over total cost of ownership, right? So thinking about, about extrapolated over a 3-year period where we'll look at a little bit of the differences of where costs might lie in difference as we look at, what is the big cost difference kind of. Then we'll go into use cases. We've got a couple customers that have been on Conductor OSS in the past and have upgraded or switched over to Orkes Conductor. So we'll just highlight those a little bit to showcase their use cases and their thoughts on doing so. And then I'll get into kind of closing thoughts and remarks. So I think we'll be good. We've got a good session for you guys. So I'll dive right in. So with core functionality, something I want to cover first, right, is the inception of Conductor OSS. So Conductor OSS actually was built at Netflix. It was Netflix Conductor back in 2016, and it was built by the founders of Orkes today. And so with Netflix Conductor, that became Conductor OSS when Netflix dropped the repository for it. We forked it off and became Conductor OSS. And Conductor OSS is really that battle-tested core workflow engine that turned into the enterprise version, which is Orkes Conductor today. So when we talk about the core functionality as well, too, I'll refer to Orkes Conductor and Conductor OSS as just Conductor for this sake, as these are core functions of really both of these workflow engines. So the first thing is it's language agnostic, right? Conductor is language agnostic. You can code in the language that you prefer or what makes sense for the given task at hand. I think this is something that really is table stakes today when you think about workflow orchestration and you think about workflow engines. Being able to code in the language that is comfortable to you, it's what you excel at, or it's what's kind of the task or application calls for. You can code in Java, JavaScript, C#, Clojure, Golang, and Python with Orkes, or with Conductor rather. And when you're building a workflow, task workers can implement the core business logic function in any language, or can call into an HTTP endpoint that does it. And then one of the really key foundations of this language agnostic and of Conductor is that no extra work is needed to connect these different languages together, these different applications together. Conductor does all of the heavy lifting, including handling rate limits, failures, etc. Really kind of one of the next core tenets is application creation simplified. So you're able to build distributed applications in multiple languages like we talked about. There's native support for long-running processes as well as fast completion processes like API calls. So you think about a lot of different types of workflows, right? Some workflows call for those quick completion millisecond processes like an API call, or you have really long-running workflows that require a ton of durability. Durable execution, durable workflows is something that also is becoming table stakes. And so I'll use the example of an automotive company, right? And let's say that I wanted to place an order for a car. I'll put my down payment down. I probably likely won't get that car for a year and a half, right? And that workflow, so to speak, is a year and a half running long workflow. And so you need to have an engine that can support something like that can support the durable execution of something that lasts for longer than a year. And so the native support here is really great. And then being able to change or update workflows without disrupting any ongoing or scheduled workflow executions with versioning, which is also another feature that really just creates and accelerates application creation. I think as I go through this entire conversation, this presentation with you guys, I have a couple of themes that'll be pervasive throughout the presentation. And one of those is really Conductor is built to help teams create applications at speed and really give teams the tools to do that without having to worry about other issues that I'll cover a little bit later. But I think development, agility and development acceleration is going to be something I'll talk about kind of throughout this presentation. Conductor is really built for durability, error handling, and testing as well. So kind of akin to the last point I made, Conductor encodes durability to all of its workflows while removing the complexities involved in maintaining a durable execution state. You're able to view workflow executions in a timeline for easy debugging. Conductor or Orkes Conductor has a little bit of an extrapolated version of this, which I'll get into later. And then you're able to configure automatic retries when a task fails, allowing you to handle transient errors seamlessly. So those are some of the core tenets, right? When we think about Conductor as a workflow engine with Conductor OSS and Orkes Conductor. But I'm going to go into some fine detail here about some of the key differences between the two that I think are very interesting. The first being tasks and integrations. And so if you look at this image, Orkes Conductor is all encompassing of all these things, right? We've got Conductor OSS on the left side. I think it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways. Anything that Conductor OSS supports obviously is supported in Orkes Conductor as well. So we've got some tasks on the left here with Conductor OSS. Really, when it comes to a workflow engine, these are tasks that are just kind of required of any workflow engine to do its job effectively, right? We've got join tasks, worker tasks, dynamic tasks, wait tasks for durability, terminate workflow, terminate, fork join, et cetera, right? When you look at the tasks on the right, you see this breadth of tasks that really kind of give Orkes Conductor its shine and its flexibility and its power. And there's a couple here that I'll point out. And I think the first one really to talk and spend a little bit of time on is human tasks. Human tasks is something that Conductor or Orkes Conductor does exceedingly well. And I'll use a mortgage approval example workflow as an example, right? So let's say that I'm running a company and I am approving mortgages, and there are certain mortgages that, let's say that they're beneath a price or above a price that, or value rather, that I need somebody to approve. We don't want to automate that. Somebody has to actually go in and approve that application. So with human tasks, what I can do is within a workflow, when it reaches a human task, that human task can actually call or be programmed to, or built rather, to call out to a person in the organization. So let's say that my coworker, John, is a mortgage approver. And so when the workflow reaches this, John will receive an email that he needs to go into the Conductor platform and approve one of the mortgages that's come before him. We've got a really cool feature of custom built SLAs here. So that let's say that John takes his time, right? Maybe he takes an hour and a half to go look at this application. And that's just not going to cut it. We want to approve these mortgages at a pretty good clip. So what we can do is set custom SLAs. So if it takes John longer than 1 hour to go into this workflow and approve the mortgage, we can actually have somebody else get notified as well. So maybe Jeff, my other coworker, who's a little bit more topical when it comes to time, he'll be notified after that hour and he'll go in and complete the task. And you can really customize this. You can have different SLAs for different people. You can include a bunch of different users into this. The other thing too is form creation as well. That's part of the human task library, so to speak, where you're able to create custom forms. So whether it's text complete or text input, or maybe it's just a checkbox that he needs to sign to see the approval, there's really a lot of flexibility in how we can complete these tasks with these forms for human tasks. The other thing here that you'll see a ton of task-wise is LLM, right? So large language models. Obviously, generative AI, large language models are very topical. It's pretty much, if you're in software or even not in software, it's all over the news, and companies are spending valuable dollars and a ton of time thinking about how do we get generative AI applications into our business processes, into our workflows? How do we take advantage of those things? And so a lot of these tasks like LLM text complete, LLM index document, they're tasks that hinge upon the integrations that we have with a lot of these large language model providers that bridge that gap, that help companies take the idea and the notion of, I want to build generative AI applications, but I don't know how to do that, right? And Orkes Conductor is really that connecting piece of being able to do so. And so as I segue kind of into the integrations piece of this thing, there's a lot to talk about here, but I'll focus on kind of what we're talking about right now, which is that AI and LLM integration. As you can see, Orkes Conductor has a ton of integrations with a lot of the leading large language model providers out there: Azure, Claude, Gemini, AWS Bedrock, et cetera. We've also got vector databases like Pinecone and Weaviate as part of those integrations. So this allows you to integrate within your workflows and within your applications to call one of those large language models, process, do whatever you've built it to do or called it to do, and be able to, again, act as that bridge or that connection to the applications that you're trying to build, which is often a lot of people don't know where to go after I want to build and incorporate AI into my workflows. Orkes Conductor is something that can do that quite easily. Now, something that's inherent to both, but one of them is significantly more powerful than the other, is the visual workflow editor. In Conductor OSS, this is a screenshot from the open source version. You'll notice that the workflow on the right is a visual representation of the workflow that's been coded on the left, correct? And so this workflow on the right, it's very bare bones, it's very basic, but it acts to serve as a visual representation of what you're building over there on the left. It helps just to understand the process and the logic that you're using to get from the start to complete of a workflow. And this is great. It's useful. It's a great visual aid. But what Orkes Conductor does is it takes us to the next level, right? So what we've got here is a UI from Orkes Conductor. You'll notice this looks a little bit different from the open source version. So if you can see here, I've built this little workflow called a news data indexer. It's actually using one of the large language models to help me with this, but this can index news sites and certain articles, and that can pass me certain articles about a topic that I'm curious or interested in. It's a pretty simple workflow, but more on the actual part of building this. So if you notice that I've got that add task screen popped up there as well too. So that little plus sign above or below any of these tasks, these worker tasks, I'm able to actually just build the workflow out there. I don't have to build it out in the code of my preference, right? I can actually build these workflows out with the visual editor, which is not the case with the open source version. So I can add any types of tasks. I can add inline tasks, HTTP tasks. I can add system tasks, operator tasks, AI agent tasks. I can add a lot here, and I can build it just from that. Although conversely, at the same time, if I want to code it, I'm also free to do so as well. I can go in and write all of this from code, and it'll populate on the left just as it does in the open source version. So this really creates this awesome duality of being able to do both, right? And I think it's really important for us, and we don't necessarily call ourselves a low code or a no code platform. We believe that developers take pride in the work and take a lot of pride in the way that they do their work. And oftentimes we think that they don't want necessarily something to make the coding easier or kind of replace a lot of the harder, challenging tasks that some developers like to separate themselves from others with. But this really creates this way to do both. And if I'm somebody that's not as technical, I can go in and start creating kind of the bare bones outline of a workflow, and I can have somebody come in and help kind of connect all the pieces together with code if that is the choice that we want to make. So a ton of flexibility with the visual workflow editor, and really a big staple of Orkes Conductor when it comes to creating workflows and applications. We talk about scalability. This one's pretty straightforward. Conductor OSS can have about 100 tasks per second of throughput, with Orkes Conductor having over 1,000 tasks per second of throughput. Parallel forks on Conductor OSS are quite limited. Orkes Conductor can sustain 60,000 plus parallel forks in one execution. It can actually go much higher than that if that's what your application calls for. And in terms of availability, we've got up to 4 nines of SLA availability on the Orkes Conductor side, as opposed to not really any sort of finite number with Conductor OSS being open source in nature. So another big piece of this in terms of key differences is enterprise grade security. So Orkes Conductor runs on SOC 2 Type 2 certified infrastructure, has multi-layer threat mitigation policies, including cold vulnerability scans, pen testing, firewall, DDoS protection, kind of all of the table stakes things of enterprise grade security that when building applications and workflows at an enterprise scale, it's a necessary component, right? And users can securely sign into Orkes Conductor with single sign-on with any OAuth 2.0 provider, create workflows that security class sensitive data like authentication tokens. And then this last piece is, I would say, almost as important as kind of that visual workflow editor component, but Orkes Conductor provides granular control over authorized access to workflows, tasks, secrets, AI prompts, and more with RBAC. RBAC is roles-based access control, and it's really a staple feature of Orkes Conductor. If you look at this screenshot over there on the right, we've got John test here. It looks like I'm giving John the ability to execute on a specific integration. So what this allows me to do is with anybody within an organization that's on Orkes Conductor, I can give them explicit permissions not only within an integration as just shown here, but I can give them permissions to workflows, tasks, secrets, tags, domains, and more. And I can tell them, maybe I want this person to be read-only, or maybe I don't want this person to have the ability to delete a workflow or a task. Maybe I want them to only be able to update and not delete it. So what this does is it allows people, users, et cetera, to build this really vast network of who you're giving permissions to within your teams. You can have teams building applications. When we talk about distributed applications, you can have teams building applications simultaneously and giving them certain access to pieces of workflows to reduce time it takes to actually create workflows. When you talk about industries like finance and banking and other industries that have a ton of sensitive data passing back and forth, this is a way to really guarantee that from a back-end perspective of being able to say, we've only got the trusted team, the compliance team, et cetera, that has read-only or write-only access to certain things. So roles-based access control is really a big differentiator when it comes to Conductor OSS versus Orkes Conductor. We'll talk a little bit about heightened observability here. I've got a couple of screenshots that drill kind of down progressively as we go through them, but this is a screenshot of the Orkes Conductor UI. And this is really just a list of the workflow executions that have happened. And so if you'll notice, we've got start time, we've got end time there, we've got the workflow ID, the workflow name, and then the status, which is conditionally formatted, green obviously being completed, and red would be a failed execution. So from here, I can understand what workflow ID was either complete or failed, what that custom name of the workflow is, if it failed, what time did it fail at the event time, or the end time rather, and then when they started. And we can take that a little bit further when we look into task executions. So this is drilling down from the workflow into the specific tasks. You'll notice that we also have start time, end time here. We've also got task execution ID. We've got the scheduled time, and then we've got the task type there as well. We've noticed a couple of HTTP and event tasks here, and we've got the workflow name that these tasks are associated with. Again, conditionally formatted to showcase if something has failed or completed. And then we'll get into workflow definitions. So workflow definitions are how you define a workflow before you actually go and run or execute on that workflow. And part of this visual here includes the incorporation of tags, which I'll get to in a second. But you can see the workflow name here. You can see the description that you've given it. Again, the created time, the owner email of the person who's created this workflow. You can see the latest version that it's running on. So we've got a couple here that are version 1. We've got version 3. And you can also see tags. Tags are in the purple here, and tags are a phenomenal way that kind of hinge upon the roles-based access control feature, where I can go in and I can tag workflows, I can tag tasks, I can tag user groups and create user groups that I can go in and tag and search for, and then I can give permissions to more than one person. I can give permissions to an entire user group that is working on a specific thing, and maybe I don't want them being able to work on something else, or even just for indexability or this observability, it makes this increasingly easier to go through and find kind of what you're looking for to an extent, right? So that's really a great couple of slides that exemplify the heightened observability that Orkes Conductor offers over Conductor OSS. And this is another thing. I mentioned that Conductor OSS has a bit of a timeline view. It's a little bit I would say watered down than what this one is. But if you see, I've got an insurance claim workflow running here. You can see the running tab in that cyan blue up top, which indicates that it's running. So this is all live. It would be live rather if this wasn't a screenshot. But you can see that we've got these lines. So for each of these tasks that have run, you can see when and exactly when and they start and when they stop. And you can see the amount of time it takes for these to complete. So it looks like that join ref task completed in 330 milliseconds. And those two get customer details and get policy details tasks completed in 235 milliseconds. If there were any tasks that didn't complete, they'd be conditionally formatted as red. And you'd be able to see not just when they ended or if they didn't complete, you'd be able to see the time it took for them to not complete, which can be indicative of maybe an issue or a debugging problem that would be easier to solve here. I can see if it took 100 milliseconds before it didn't complete, or if it took maybe a full second or even longer than that. So again, this timeline view, another tool that really kind of bolsters the observability of Orkes Conductor. And then the last thing I'll talk about in terms of observability are these metrics dashboards. These metrics dashboards are, they come with Orkes Conductor, they're built in, they're powered by Grafana, and they're totally customizable. You can create a ton of different views. You can look at running workflows. You can look at workflow start rate, task pull rates, current Redis usage, CPU usage, sweeper rates. There's a ton of just core data in here, right, that you can take a look at, you can customize. There's also a function here that you can build custom alerts for. So if a certain number of workflows aren't running, drops below a certain number, you'll be notified, or really anything else that you can think of. You'll be able to create an alert and you'll be alerted to one of these dashboards. So let's segue a little bit into Orkes Cloud. We're still kind of in this key differences section, right? And so Orkes Cloud is the way that Orkes Conductor is delivered in a managed service, as opposed to Conductor OSS, which has to be self-hosted. Orkes Cloud has managed Conductor clusters. It's got additional enterprise features. It's got operational usage insights. It can be Orkes hosted or it can be customer hosted. It can also be available on your cloud provider of choice. We can provide it on Azure, GCP, or AWS. Comes with some enterprise level features that I can kind of quickly skim over. A couple of these we've talked about throughout this call, but we've got end-to-end encryption of data in transit and at rest with hardened security posture with pen tests and ongoing vulnerability scanning. We've got single sign-on, the advanced metrics you just saw. You've got, again, back to this kind of like, we want developers, we want teams focused on agility and focused on velocity of development. We can let us do the DevOps heavy lifting, right? And so we can provide on your cloud provider of choice and region, include a dedicated VPC, private links, VPC pairing, and more. When it comes to cluster expansion, as you grow, it's increasingly easy for us to help choose the right type of cluster for your usage and easily accommodate to high levels of growth with non-shared address-based clusters. That last section is really important, right? So the non-shared address-based clusters essentially mean that you're independent of any of our other customers that are on Orkes Cloud, right? And so if you are in a shared address space on another platform, another company's compute might interfere with the compute that you're doing, or it might cause latencies on your end if you're in a similar address space. So non-shared address space with Orkes Cloud is fantastic and a really good option there. And then high availability. We talked about availability a little bit, but we've got high available clusters deployed across multiple AZs and multiple regions with up to 99.99, those 4 nines of SLA. And this kind of just showcase what's each of these models looks like, right? So this is pretty straightforward. We've got the Orkes hosted version here with Orkes Cloud control plane and the Orkes Conductor cluster on the left within the Orkes Cloud. And then for customer hosted, same thing here. We've got the Orkes Cloud control plane in the Orkes Cloud, but we've got the Conductor cluster actually on the customer cloud, which again, customer cloud of choice here. And all that data compute stays on your cloud account so that you benefit from your custom security and compliance postures, while you get all the benefits of a fully managed cloud offering. So something that we'll go into a little bit here is total cost of ownership, right? And this has been extrapolated out a little bit. These aren't hard values. There's no specific value here, but this is really just to illustrate in the areas of which, if you're self-hosting Conductor OSS or you're letting Orkes do the hosting, these are kind of the differences in where you can expect prices to really differ. So this is a 3-year total cost of ownership, self-managed with open source Conductor versus Orkes Cloud. This is customer hosted instance here, but overall, it's about a 40% reduction in total cost of ownership. And if you look at the blocks that are color coded, you can see that security being the purple one is a pretty big difference as well. So building and maintaining compliance can often cost quite a bit. The other big one, right, is downtime, right? And so with those 4 nines of availability, we're preventing a ton of downtime, which you're quite liable to in a self-hosted or open source configuration. From an engineering standpoint, when you're self-hosting, the engineering resources are likely going to be a lot more in terms of engineering time and the time and the amount of engineers that you have to hire and their cost. And then infrastructure too. Infrastructure obviously is something that we handle in a hosted environment and something that you'll have to build out with open source. So again, back to that theme of we want our developers that are using Orkes, we want teams that are using Orkes to not have to worry about infrastructure. We want them building these mission critical applications, and we want developers to do that. And I think that developers don't want to spend a ton of time managing infrastructure. They want to be on the front lines building these applications and taking things to market, and increasing kind of that competitive nature and being able to take products to market faster than certain competitors can. So here's some common use cases. These are some current customers of ours. They are customers that have been on Conductor OSS in the past. They've now moved over to Orkes Conductor. The first one really being Foxtel. Foxtel is one of the biggest media and entertainment companies in Australia. And some of the problems they have had in the past were separate workflow execution logic from business logic, increased maintenance in the chain of microservices execution as business evolved, as they grew, and increased operational overhead and troubleshooting failures. So as they continue to grow, it took longer and longer to try and debug or troubleshoot these failures that they might have had with workflows. And as you can see with this quote below, Orkes has been instrumental in increasing developer agility, creating cost efficiencies, and building highly reliable and secure applications. This next company, Normalize, is a cybersecurity company. Normalize needed a way for microservices and workflows to be executed in precise patterns. And when assessing extensive cloud environments, troubleshooting faults in assessment-related processes grew more and more demanding. When you think about an industry like cybersecurity, the financial losses that can be associated with fraud attacks are huge, right? I mean, fraud accounts for billions and billions of dollars in losses every year. And as a company that is fighting fraud and then focused on cybersecurity, airtight workflows and as minimal latencies as possible is something that's of the utmost importance, as well as being able to reduce the time it takes to debug, right? And Orkes Conductor does a phenomenal time with a lot of the observability things that we talked about earlier of really taking debugging, and I'm not exaggerating here when I say you're able to debug in minutes as opposed to days or hours. And as this quote kind of also iterates, looking at Conductor on Orkes Cloud to identify which task is causing trouble compared to what we were doing before is like night and day. It's a 90% reduction in time to debug issues. So that's kind of a lot, right? So we've covered a fair amount of topics. And these things are really, I would say, the big key differences between somebody that's evaluating Conductor OSS or Orkes Conductor. And we can kind of recap them here. So Orkes Conductor provides a wider range of built-in tasks and integrations. We saw those integrations with the LLM and AI providers, as well as the vector databases. The visual workflow editor for a more seamless experience is monumentally powerful. It's extremely good at extrapolating for people that want to build that way or want to code, and the ability to do both is very powerful in and of itself. Increased performance for higher workloads and availability via increased task throughput. Again, you guys saw the difference in terms of scalability. It's just easier. There's a ton of more performance with Orkes Conductor as it relates to scaling efficiently. And enterprise-grade security with SOC 2 Type 2 certification, secrets, SSO, and RBAC, that all-important RBAC we spend a good amount of time talking about. Heightened execution observability with insights from the metrics dashboards, and the managed infrastructure with the cloud provider of your choice. So these are, I would say, the broad, six things rather that really set apart Orkes Conductor versus Conductor OSS that can help kind of guide a deciding factor in terms of which one might be the best for your business. So I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions here for a sec. I think these are probably on the mind of a lot of people here. We get asked them a lot as well too. I thought it would be nice to take some time just to answer these. So can I use Conductor OSS for business purposes? Conductor OSS is provided with Orkes Queues, which is under a restricted license. So you can use Conductor OSS and Orkes Queues for any internal project. But you can't resell any service using both. You'll have to replace Orkes Queues with something else, or you'll just have to upgrade to Orkes Conductor entirely. Number two, can I use the developer playground to visually create workflows and export the JSON to OSS? Yeah, you can actually. The developer playground is something that we offer. I haven't touched on it here really, but it's on our website. You can go check it out. It's aptly named a playground, so you can go and mess around with some of the features that we've talked about here today. So you can do this. You can export the JSON to OSS, but the task workers used in the definition, they're only available on Orkes Conductor, so they won't work on OSS. Like, let's say if you use a human task or something. And then can I easily reuse workflows deployed on open source once I've migrated to Orkes Conductor? Yeah, technically, if you do build up on Conductor OSS and then choose to run on Orkes Conductor, those workflows running on OSS are fully compliant with Orkes Conductor as long as they don't have any of the tasks. Well, they couldn't. So the answer to that is yes. So that's pretty much all I've got for this presentation. I wanted it to be short, quick, and compact. I think we showcased a lot of good value points here about the differences between the two. Something else I wanted to note too, which we've actually just released today, which I'm really excited to talk about, is our new kind of self-service enterprise plan that we've released. we wanted to give developers and people an easier way to get access to an Orkes Conductor cluster that's managed by us. And so right now you can go onto orkes.io and you can sign up, no credit card required. There's a 14-day free trial associated with this. And you can sign up and get provisioned an Orkes cluster in 15 minutes or so. I think Zach has just dropped the link there if you want to check out a blog post that kind of illustrates a lot more of the differences here. Or not differences, but illustrates out kind of the features of this self-serve option. But yeah, we built this just to give people more access to the enterprise version of Orkes for you guys to try out. So we're super excited about that. There are a few other things. We've got a blog post up that also illustrates the differences between Conductor OSS and open source Conductor, Conductor OSS and Orkes Conductor that you can go check out and read as well too. And I believe in the follow-up email, we will be sending a couple more pieces of literature that you guys can just check out that talks a little bit more about Conductor, Orkes Conductor. And so with that being said, I really appreciate everybody for coming today. I hope you found this somewhat informative. If you did ask a question in the chat, we will try and get to you. The idea here is really with the questions, we wanted to keep this very high level, right? We wanted to keep this as something that you could go back with and kind of think about the differences here. And so any questions in the chat will be reached out. You'll be reached out to by a team member here at Orkes so that they can facilitate a conversation around, kind of the roots of your question rather than just getting it blatantly asked here on the webinar. So with that being said, again, thank you so much. And that concludes the end of the webinar. And I hope you guys join us for another one soon.